Welcome back, lost travelers. It seems you found your way back to me once again. I am Dr. Whisper, and it looks like your next appointment has just begun. So, pour yourself something strong, grab a snack and settle down by the fire. You're going to need your strength. Where we're going, night materialized over Interstate 8. Frank Gibber peered out at the horizon Adisert as he drove, his mind thinking of getting home from his business trip. His fawn suddenly stalled and came to a complete stop. His check engine light began to flash. "Damn it," he exclaimed. Frank reached to open the driver door and stopped himself as he immediately thought of the urban legends and horror stories that involved people leaving their vehicle at night to never see day again. Maybe I can call for help, he thought as he pulled out his cell phone. His signal had no bars. Of course, he blurted out to himself. Frank used various things from his travel case and around the van to cover all of the windows. He crawled in the back and tucked himself in underneath a blanket. He decided that he'd wait until it was light to go find help. Frank Gibber was nearly asleep when his van began to rock back and forth. The spare blanket he had used to cover the windshield fell off, and he saw a furry clawed hand smack against the windshield. The windshield cracked, but held. A fearful Frank shrunk himself under the blanket. Something scraping against the van could be heard. 7 a.m. rolled around, and the sunlight shone into the van through the windshield. The warmth of the sunlight bathed Frank's blanket. Its warmth calmed him. Frank came out from underneath the blanket and slowly peeled the makeshift covers off the windows. He saw nothing but road and desert for miles. That was both good and bad. After grabbing a few essentials, Frank cautiously stepped out of the van. His van was shot. Scratch marks adorned the metalwork. The back left tire was shredded. The back doors were decorated with dents that appeared to have come from large fists, and the windshield was cracked. What the hell did I manage to avoid? Faced with no alternative, Frank Gibber walked north on the I-8, longing for his wife. The further he walked, the more animal carcasses he found. Initially, Frank was unfazed. He became disturbed when he noticed the similarity between them all. The teeth were missing. His gut told him that whatever had assaulted his van was responsible, and that the same fate awaited him if he couldn't find refuge before nightfall. After walking 4 hours, Frank's water supplies were not, and his walking had been reduced to staggering. He'd nearly given up hope after he'd staggered for what felt like miles. His hope was restored when he managed to spot a house in the distance. Frank dizzily rang the doorbell. He silently prayed that someone would answer. His prayer was answered when the door swung open to reveal a well-aged man in his boxes. Frank's mind raced with horror stories of recluses that ate people. "Please don't eat me," Frank managed as he succumbed to dehydration. Frank's eyes opened. He slowly took in his surroundings to find that they were unfamiliar. All he knew was that he was in a house. The power was out, and the owner was nowhere to be seen. As he slowly rose from the couch, he heard a crash to his right. He turned and immediately spotted a furry fist that had crashed through a window. The fist unballed and extended a clawed middle finger as the hand slowly retracted from the window. The whole house began to shake. The shaking was followed by loud roars that were coming from outside. The shaking stopped, and the front door splintered open as Frank's van crashed through it and parted the wall. The driver door opened, and out Frank's eyes shot open as he awoke from his nightmare to a loud, piercing sound that he realized to be his own screams. The aging man he had seen earlier was now fully clothed and walked over to him while shushing. Frank blinked a couple of times to clear his head. "You're clothed now. I was doing laundry when you showed. It isn't like I ever get visitors out here." "Well, welcome visitors anyway," the man replied in a southern accent. "So, you aren't going to kill me? Not unless you deserve it. Why would you go and think of something like that? I have had nothing but bad luck. Being butchered and eaten seemed like the natural progression of things. You clearly didn't end up here by choice. What brought you here?" "My van broke down, and was attacked in the middle of the night. Frank cautiously replied in an effort to hide that he went from around Arizona. It sounds like you met old GUMJAW. Who? Not who, but what? GUMJAW has been around these parts for a while now, and he's a crafty old bastard. A few years back, he got my Doug, and nearly me. I barely made it inside in time, the Southerner replied in an ominous tone. Normally Frank would have called anyone crazy that told him such. This was not one of those times. What is this GUMJAW? What does it want? I know not what it wants, but I have noticed that it has a fascination with teeth. Likely because it's missing albeit a single tooth. How do you know this? The man rubbed his eyes in resignation and agitation. I watched it trip out my dog's teeth after I had made it inside. It tried to fit them in its mouth. You still haven't told me what GUMJAW is, and for good reason. Look, I'm going to head to town tomorrow. I'll take you then. It'll be best for you to have forgotten everything you've experienced by then. The name's Elliot Tuber, by the way. Frank Gibber was not pleased with being told to wait until the next day, and he let that be known now. Listen here, Elliot. I've had my van destroyed, came close to death. I'm dealing with the unknown, and you want me to sit here until tomorrow. Quiet down, you damn fool. It's dark out, and I'm not willing to risk getting picked apart on the way out to the truck just because you can't wait a few hours. If you raise your voice again, I'm going to throw you outside on your bottom with a bell tied around your neck. There is no telling how close GUMJAW is, and I don't want to draw its attention. The two men sat quietly for quite some time, both thinking of how to cut through the tension. Frank finally came round and broke the silence. Do you have a working telephone? No, Frank, Edo not. Frank left his spot on the couch and slowly began to back away from Elliot. How the hell do you know my name? I never gave it to you. Calm down, you drama queen. I went through all of your belongings, including your wallet, to try to figure out who you were and why you were out here. Frank Gibber sat back down on the couch, relieved. Why do you live other if you have to deal with that thing? Believe it or not, GUMJAW is a more recent problem. Luckily, I've never had to deal with GUMJAW getting in my home. You didn't really answer my question, Frank. You need to learn to let things go, especially your memory of this incident. There are things that you simply do not have to know. A familiar scratching sound could be heard coming from the front door. GUMJAW was trying to claw its way in. Damn, he must have heard us talking. Or perhaps he thinks are related. Come with me, responded Elliot Tuber in a strangely calm voice. Oh God, what Eru going to do? I don't want to die. Don't be such a pansy. Do what I say and you'll get out of this in one piece. Frank turned his head back toward the door as he and Elliot were climbing upstairs. The beast's head was through a freshly carved hole in the door. It was trying to crawl through. Frank was nearly pushed to his breaking point when he saw the creature clearly for the first time. Oh, how Frank regretted it. GUMJAW's eyes were a brilliant bouton-setelling emerald, his ears so pointy and all the better for hearing, his mouth all gum except for a single tooth, his nose all black and wet, and his fur the dullest of grays. That's Werewolf, Frank exclaimed in a panic. Frank followed Elliot into a dark room. Elliot slammed the door shut and flipped on the light. Various firearms were encased in cabinets, but that wasn't all that caught Frank's eyes. The walls of the room were adorned with stuffed heads that belonged to various beasts. Werewolf, Kappa, Lizardman, and Yeti, to name a few. Elliot Tubb began to speak, his southern accent missing. Frank, I haven't been forthcoming with you. The fact of the matter is that I used to be a monster hunter. GUMJAW is of my doing. A few years back, I caught wind of GUMJAW's presence in a small town down in Louisiana. I confronted and fought GUMJAW in a swamp. I emerged victorious, or so I thought. When I thought GUMJAW dead, I tore out his teeth as mementos, since I couldn't take his head as I had to go back through town. As I was on the final tooth, his eyes opened and his jaw snapped down. "He almost got my hand with a pair of pliers," he claimed. Up until GUMJAW, the whole silver bullet by indeed to kill werewolves thing was just a myth. But with GUMJAW, that has just got to be the way. There's always a way to kill something. He has the ability to heal from the most grievous of wounds. Frank stared at Elliot with wide eyes. "What is a damn werewolf doing in the desert? It followed my scent. It wants its teeth. So, you live out here because you didn't want to lead it into a town." Elliot let out a deep sigh as he shoved a few more objects against the metal door. "No, I didn't expect him to track him. I live out here because I messed up really badly. I killed an innocent man that I thought was a crew. His body was found and I was linked to it. I'm a wanted man. This house was provided to me by another member of my organization. What is a career off him? Never mind that. Have you ever used a gun before?" "Just a couple of times." "Good enough," Elliot responded as he handed Frank a magnum. "So, this thing is loaded with silver bullets." Elliot snorted as he picked up an AK. "No, where and how would I even go about getting bullets made of silver? Then how the hell are we supposed to kill that thing?" "Who said anything about killing it? Your trip to town got expedited." Frank Gibber stared blankly at the magnum in his hand, contemplating suicide. "What's the point of the guns if we can't kill it? Weren't you listening? We can still hurt it." The makeshift barricade began to falter as the door began to buckle. Elliot Tubber smashed open the window to his right with the butt of his. "Get on the roof," Elliot ordered. The two men climbed onto the roof by way of the smashed-out window just as GUMJAW broke into their previous location. "I'm going to lower you down. I want you to unlock the shed and bring the truck around." "Got it," Elliot stated. Frank nodded, tucked the magnum into his waistband, and lowered himself to where he was hanging from the roof. Elliot knelt down, grabbed Frank's hands, and slowly lowered him closer to the ground. Elliot let go after placing a key ring in his hand, and Frank fell the rest of the way, landing on his feet. Frank sprinted to the shed as quickly as his legs would carry him. He fumbled with the key ring, trying to figure out which key matched the padlock. He heard gunfire coming from the roof. "Screw it," Frank mumbled to himself as he drew his magnum and shot off the padlock. Elliot fired rapidly as GUMJAW charged toward him. He rolled away at the last second. GUMJAW's feet scraped along the roof, causing shingles to come loose as he walked. One such shingle shifted and refused to budge beyond that. GUMJAW's right foot became caught underneath the Elliot smiled when he noticed his adversary's predicament. He pulled the trigger and waited for the bullets that never came. Elliot looked down and realized that his clip was gone. He then looked back at GUMJAW and saw that pierced on his lone tooth was the ammo clip. The rumble of an engine could be. Elliot decided to take a risk and turned his head to where he could glance down off the roof. The truck roared past this location, then the house, and onto the interstate. "Fuck you, Frank," Elliot muttered, crestfallen. The ex-Mon hunter, who was way past his prime, in both physique and years, tightly gripped his AK. His main means of escape had left, and he was now essentially trapped on a roof with the most vengeful and savage of beasts, a werewolf, stealing his nerves. Elliot Tubber turned his head back just in time to witness GUMJAW break free of the shingle which had come to snare one of his feet during the scuffle. His immediate instincts urged him to pull the trigger. Alas, the clip, no, the magazine, he internally chided, had been lost mid-fight. Elliot used what little time he had to change how he held his rifle, repositioning his hold on it as though it were a club. The emerald-dyed hellion closed the gap between itself and its would-be prey. Without missing a beat, Elliot swung Thagan, throwing all of his weight behind it. GUMJAW, however, did miss a beat, or rather the beat. A clawed hand struck the gun free of the human's hands, sending it flying from the roof, wallacing the other to grab and lift the man by the scruff of the neck. Tubber was raised level with his adversary's face. Seeing a chance, He swung a fist at the creature's face. GUMJAW caught the man's swing with its free hand. The move was eerily familiar, one that GUMJAW had bore witness to nearly a century ago in a silver mine in Creede, Colorado. And narrowed his eyes, his overwhelming beastly rage temporarily sated by curiosity. GUMJAW had much to say, were only he able to speak. The power of speech had long become lost to him, for he had spent too much time in the form of the wolf, and was now more beast than man. Still, in his mind, the turn of events was most fortuitous. He'd just have to communicate in another way. Defiantly, Elliot kicked his captor. Unfortunately for him, GUMJAW didn't even flinch. Pain or no, GUMJAW retaliated by slamming his captive down into the roof and pinning him by the arms. A knee to the groin greeted the werewolf, a suicidal move, if there ever was one, causing the beast's grip to loosen enough to where Elliot was able to free one of his hands. The monster hunter quickly reached into his pocket with his free shaking hand. GUMJAW's recovery was quick. The monstrosity began to crush the arm in its grasp with vice-like strength, and brought the claws on his other hand to bear. Elliot Tuber grunted in pain under the strain to his arm, unsure as to whether the bones had yet begun to crack, and as his opponent's claws neared and prepared to tear open his stomach, blood dripped from GUMJAW's hand. A pocket knife had risen to meet it. The lyanthrop emitted a sound that was a cross between a yelp and a growl. As he reflexively recoiled, droplets of dark black blood were carelessly splattered about, trailing GUMJAW's momentary retreat. Some Phalanganto, the monster hunter's open mouth. The sudden impact in his mouth caused him to swallow in surprise, an unwelcome outcome for the man. The knowledge of the infectious transformative properties that the blood contained, coupled with its bitter taste, took Elliot out of the moment for long enough to provide his opponent with an opening. The werewolf's shoulder slammed into the washed-up monster hunter and slashed the impacted man with a clawed hand. The force of the impact was enough to send Elliot over the edge of the roof, blood squirting as he flew. GUMJAW did bother to spare his fallen foe a glance, for he had other prey to pursue. The werewolf soared forth from the rooftop and impacted against the desert sand in a four-legged run. Had he spared Aglin's or chose to jump from the opposite side of the roof, he would have noticed Elliot Tuber stirring. Granted, the fall would have killed any but the luckiest of men. However, Elliot Tuber was not a mere man, not anymore. The moon illuminated the flipped Ford truck as though it were a sinister searchlight. The driver, a bleeding man with torn skin and clothes, crawled out of the smashed-out driver's window and onto the Arizona desert. He supported himself against the overturned truck and rose to his feet while keeping a hold of his freshly dislocated shoulder and turned his gaze back toward Interstate 8. The pickup had hit something on the road at high speed, causing one of its tires to blow out and the entire machine to veer off course, but he was unsure of what. Perhaps a wooden or metal material? He'd only caught a glimpse of it for less than a couple of seconds before impact. He let go of his shoulder, ignoring the heavy-weighted feeling and burning pain, and reached into his pocket to pull out his phone. Surely he had enough distance between himself and that beast to take a moment to call for help. His smashed Andusless phone emerged to greet him. With a weary sigh, Frank Geber chucked it into the sand. "Fuck you, Elliot," Frank muttered, half-heartedly. He kicked the carcass of the truck, Elliot's truck. Had he not taken it, then he would not be in this mess, and would probably have been better off. On second thought, he'd probably still be back in the middle of nowhere, staring down a werewolf, so perhaps not. Oh well, he said to himself dismissively, as he wandered back onto the interstate to investigate what he hit. Each step onto the pavement was overbearing, brazenly drowning out the loud throbbing of his heartbeat. Worry of what might be listening in the dark brought Frank to a standstill. A pause and step was all it took. A quick single bite into Frank's neck failed him. A black-gloved hand reached down and plucked the tranquilizer from the fallen man's neck. "I've still got it," the unseen commented, slinging its quarry over its human-framed shoulder. Even with Frank Gibber's cumbersome weight, it didn't take long for the figure to retrieve the cowrips off the interstate, and to vanish into the desert with a wide grin spelled along its face. The pain was throbbing and searing. Elliot Tubbs' shoulders bulged, attempting to take on a new, larger shape. His sides contorted beyond their realm of possibility, jaw became more, and legs rearranged into a more predatory form. The moon bore down upon the wretched creature with the intensity of a furnace that could not be quenched, its gosmos accusatory and unrelenting. Elliot dared to roll over, dared to resettle his knees. Try as he might, he could not rise, but he refused to fall. Once again, he dared. He dared to dig his fingers into the soil and flung the dirt behind him. In a pain-fueled rage, he dug on no tangible physical thing awaited him. Of course, he did it out of desperation. The distraction paid off for him. The turmoil within came to an abrupt end, and with it the body morphing and thaping. It was inexplicable to him. The beast within had been slain. Once more dared, and this time he rose. He rose a man. A deep, dreadful darkness frangled itself when Frank's eyes shot open. Nothing was visible or known to the man than the fact that he was positioned upright. He struggled to move, but was held in place by two rows of radiant white appeared in response to his struggling. Frank gasped as the two rows inched closer to his face and parted. A warmth tinged his skin, and a sickly sweet odor hit his nostrils. And then came the horrifying realization it was something's mouth. Against his will, Frank Gibber whimpered, desperately. He wished he could shrink back into or merge into whatever he was bound to, and rid of the place and thing in front of him, an object with a leathery texture, a gloved finger, he realized, stroked him across the cheek. Tears and a wail escaped the terrified man as a reply came from the dark. There. The finger removed itself, disappearing back into the void. Only Frank's shakily worded question dared to follow. What? Where the hell am I? The seemingly disembodied smile excused itself. Watch your mouth, you heathen. You're in God's house. Malice and irritation dripped from the voice. Silence hung in the air until it was drowned out by the powering on of lights. The captive's eyes readjusted quickly. The stone-walled stained-glass window-endowed room was empty, save for Gibber himself and the wooden cross he was tied to. The voice snaked into the now well-lit room. Do you understand, Bait? GUMJAW is coming to meet the Lord. The room once again became pitch black. Frank Gibber's screams echoed in theater. No. Even with his limited understanding of his newly gained abilities, Elliot Tubber was able to quickly trail GUMJAW, thanks to its scent. Any doubts he had about where who was headed were erased by the debris left behind by the destroyed Ford. His destination was a derelict ominous church out in the middle of nowhere. The wooden doors were splintered. Only a few chunks hung from the frame. The old hunter boldly peered into the dark building with his gun raised. His stomach churned, and even one of his experience couldn't restrain the gasp that built up within his lips, as Gibber witnessed to the carnage that desecrated the floor and the few remaining smashed pews. The doors to their church strained and buckled under the relentless assault of GUMJAW's fists. Only after shards of the door flew into the room did the figure standing at the lectern on the opposite end of the room bother to look up from the Bible. He closed it with the utmost care with an ungloved hand. He cleared his throat, as if he had been rudely interrupted, while slid a black glove back over his bare hand. Nice of you to finally attend, GUMJAW. The werewolf hesitantly stalked forward from the entryway toward the pews, its end goal being in the room behind the man at the lectern. Smiling, the man reached into his vestment, removing 4 plastic bags and casually tossing them onto the floor beside himself. What nice teeth you had. The creature turned its gaze to the plastic bags on the floor filled with werewolf teeth. GUMJAW's teeth. GUMJAW let out a guttural snarl. Yes. Impossible for you to grow those back, isn't it? The clergyman stepped out from behind the lectern, casually stepping on teeth while doing so, and slowly stalked toward GUMJAW with his hands clasped behind his back. The lycanthrope sprinted in between a couple of the pews, but tripped and face-planted into the ground. The smiling priest dove forth pews in front of himself, shielding his head with his hands. Although GUMJAW quickly ascended to his feet, balls of steel fired from the triggered claymore, peppering both the room and GUMJAW. Windows shattered, pews splintered, muscles tore, and bones broke. The man in the vestment rose unscathed, once again, continuing his walk toward the prone, howling werewolf. GUMJAW turned its head toward the approaching man, trying to open its eyes, but failing. The clergyman leered down at the beast, as he pulled out a sharp-tipped crucifix from within his vestments. Silver. Those were balls of. The burning you feel now is mere child's play to what awaits, I assure. The crucifix bore down on the beast's head. GUMJAW blindly swatted it away out of desperation, his clawed hand tearing into the man's robes and arm. The once smiling man let out a grunt of pain and frustration as the crucifix skidded across the church floor. GUMJAW's emerald eyes popped open. His rage was given sight. The human Laphidas. He clutched his bleeding arm. GUMJAW began to grunt and gurgle in pain, for making contact of any sort with the crucifix was not without consequence for a werewolf, a beast of devilry. GUMJAW swatted, or rather attempted to swat, at the man with the hand that had touched the crucifix. It liquefied, dripping Jinto, a puddle of ebony onto the floor, as it dissolved away before it could so much as graze its target. The gray creature recoiled, while the priest staggered backwards to the dropped crucifix. Both combatants made their final play. GUMJAW lunged. The clergyman grabbed the crucifix and pivoted. Swaths off, ebony and crimson coated the entire church. Pieces of human and chunks of werewolf. There wasn't enough of both left for either to have survived. Elliot's dinner barely contained itself within his stomach. It was a true test of willpower. At the end of the destroyed room, and on the other side of the untouched lectern, was a mostly well-preserved door. The handle jiggled a couple of times, and then the door slowly opened, and the man in torn vestments emerged with his once bleeding arm wrapped in strips of cloth. Elliot Tuber quickly surveyed the room once more. GUMJAW had been here, and obviously was the ebony that lined the floor, but he had been so certain that Frank Gibber was here too. After all, his scent. The hunter glanced at the crimson pools, catching sight of a wooden cross that was on its side at the edge of the room. Then he looked back at the chunks of human meat, and then Theprius. The priest met Elliot's gaze with a smile. I'm impressed that you hid GUMJAW's teeth in the glove box. He never had any idea. The hunter Rossetti's pistol and stated, in a monotone voice, you killed him. That's Father Bryant to you. And of course, I was sent here to pick up your slack. What? Much to Elliot's surprise, the man walked over to the lectern and picked up the Bible, repeatedly shaking it at Hymas. He spoke. I was dispatched to take care of GUMJAW after it became evident that you weren't going to. But I find it quite peculiar you were able to find us out in the middle of nowhere. But you know it makes sense when I look at those black blood stains on the neck of your shirt. You consumed werewolf blood. Hope you're ready to meet God. Elliot Tuber shot at the priest, managing to nick the shoulder of his robe as the clergyman dared to duck and weave toward the nearest intact pew with the holy book in hand. Funny you should preach. You are nothing more than a killer hiding behind the name of God. Elliot shouted as he paced across the opposite end of the church in the hopes of getting a better angle. The building's proprietor wasted no time. Quickly, he crawled under as many of the pews as he could, closing the distance without giving his target a line of fire. The hunter rapid-fired 3 shots at the fast-moving threat, causing it to comb to a pause at an intact bench. You're pretty free with your shots, Ebit, that your revolver is modified. Wouldn't you like to know? Why don't you come out so that you can find out? I modify my weapons, too, he coolly replied, reaching into the depths of his garb with a free hand. taking hold of the sharp-tipped crucifix. But yes, let's find out together. A quick, slight gasp escaped Elliot Tubber's mouth in reaction to the fierce speed in which the preacher had taken to rising and leaping straight for him from the pew. 2 more rounds launched from the revolver, striking the air and then the stone wall in the back. The Bible flew from the supposed worshipper's hand, disarming the older man. Instinctively, Elliot backed out, whined, kicked into the air as the priest lunged. The kick connected with the pastor's hand, causing the crucifix to flee to the opposite side of the room and land near the revolver. What followed from there on was a blur of motion, a wanton meeting of punches and kicks, a symphony of dodges. Sometimes the old monster hunter would throw a punch, and it would land at the cost of him receiving a kick. Sometimes he wouldn't connect at all. The man of the cloth faced the same difficulty for a time mental. He managed to kick his prey square in the chin, which caused him to fall to the ground next to some nearly disintegrated pews. Elliot attempted to rise as he had done so before, but was met with a kick to the ribs. Exhaling in pain, Elliot Tubber fell to the floor, stomach down. Again and again, the process was repeated. Eventually, the frequency and ferocity of the kicks ramped up. Turn, hide nothing from God in his domain. Turn, so that I may kill you like the devilish spawn that you are. A pained grunt was all the reply that Elliot could muster, and the assault continued. It continued, and eventually reached a crescendo, to where Elliot found himself barely conscious. Desperately, he rested a hand on one of the splintered pews. Daybreak came. Beautiful rays of light shone through the remaining stained glass windows of the church. The light enveloped the gun and crucifix on the ground, a message from God to Father Bryant, if there ever was one. At least that was the priestess on the matter. Wearily the battered man watched with blurry vision that slowly sharpened as his tormentor limped to the tools of his trade. His grip tightened on the splintered pew in agitation. His death was nigh. The wood broke off into his clenched hand, and then it flew. The strength behind the throw was superhuman, the aim true, and the impact a ferocious surprise to the would-be killer's spine. Father Bryant fell without any hesitancy or choice. The weapons lie not far from him, but still beyond reach, if only just. Damn you, he cursed. He wanted nothing more than to rise to his feet, grab the gun, and to repeatedly blast his prey in the face. That was no longer a reasonable outcome, for he could not feel his legs. The aged monster hunter forced himself to his feet, with the support of the pew, and began his labor of 1,000 steps. The journey began with a stagger and ended with a swagger as he walked past the crawling paraplegic, kicked the crucifix further away, and grabbed his gun. Elliot very quickly put 2 and 2 together about his adversary's condition. Weakly, the man of the cloth grabbed Tubbs' ankle and pathetically looked upon him. "Kill me, please." Elliot Tubb jerked his leg free of the fallen man's grip and glanced down at him. Smugness ebbed from his voice. "Sorry, I don't kill people." And with that, Elliot Tubber left the building. Father Bryant stared in silence as the finality of it all sunk in. He was alone. He was trapped. Sure, he could crawl out of the church in due time, but a large stretch of desert stood between him and civilization. He let out a sigh of defeat and began to crawl, pausing when another truth struck him. Lifting up, a hand blackened with wet blood, he stared and contemplated. How cruel. Forsake God or die. Become a monster. No, I was always a monster. I just didn't see it. Howls of laughter echoed throughout the desecrated church. Hey everyone, thanks so much for sticking around until the end of the story. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you are having a good time hanging out with me for these weekly stories, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. I love hearing your thoughts. I'll see you all in the next one. Music command. This is Reaper Squad. Music O. Eyes on the mutts. Let's clean the damn canal. Music nightstick. Fog on the wire. 5 in formation. Guns on fire. Thermal's hot. 2 clicks north. Dogman tracks. Time to go to work. We move quiet. Safety's off. Crosshairs dance. Engines cough. Contact front. Flash goes white. Reaper squadowns the night. Don't fear the Reaper. Fear the Reaper. Fear the knock. We hunt the dark around the clock. Dark and run. We don't flinch. 1 mag, 1 breath, 1 inch. Don't fear the Reaper. Fear the knock. We hunt the dark around the clock. Dogmen run. We don't flinch. 1 leg, 1 breath, 1 inch. Smoke rolls heavy static hum music. Applause boy. Hot brass rain. Heartbeat flat. Another shadow don't come back. We don't talk. We don't pray. We just make nightmares fade away. You wanted the dark? We own the dark. That's short burst. Best short burst. Short burst. Don't fear the reap. Fear the Reaper. Fear the creed. 5 ghosts, built to bleed. Smoke clears. Welcome back, wanderers. You've returned to my fire again, and I, Doctor Whisper, have been expecting you. Settle in, pour yourself something strong, and keep close to the flames. Where we're headed, you'll need the warmth. Night settled heavy over Interstate 8 when Frank Gibber stared out across the empty Arizona desert, eager to get home after a long business trip. The hum of his van sputtered, coughed, and then died altogether. The check engine light blinked wildly. Fantastic, he muttered. His hand moved toward the door handle, then froze. Countless roadside horror tales flashed through his mind, all involving someone stepping out of their car after dark and never being found again. Maybe I can call in help, he whispered, pulling out his phone. No bars. Of course. Frank grabbed whatever he could from his travel bag and covered every window he could reach, turning the van into a makeshift bunker. Then he crawled into the back, wrapped himself in a blanket, and decided he'd wait for sunrise. Sleep almost claimed him. Almost till the whole van lurched violently from side to side. The blanket he'd hung over the windshield slipped, revealing a massive fur-covered hand slamming against the glass. Long claws scraped across it, cracking it, but not quite breaking through. Frank curled into a ball under the blanket as something heavy dragged itself across the exterior, claws screeching on metal. At last, sunlight poured in. Warm, golden, steady. Frank emerged and slowly uncovered the windows. Nothing, only endless highway and desert. Good and terrifying. Stepping out into the morning heat, he surveyed the damage. Claw marks tore into the metal. 1 tire was shredded. The back doors looked caved in from repeated blows. The windshield was a web of cracks. What on earth did I survive? He whispered. With no options left, he started walking north, along the I-8, praying he'd reach anyone before nightfall returned. But the farther he walked, the more he noticed dead animals littering the desert. He barely reacted at first, until he saw that every single one of them had their teeth torn out. His stomach twisted. Whatever hit his van was collecting them. Hours later, dehydrated and stumbling, Frank spotted a small house in the distance. He rang the bell with trembling hands. When the door opened, an older man in boxers stared back at him. Frank's panic took over. Please, don't eat me, he babbled before collapsing. He woke on a couch inside. The power was out. The house was eerily silent. The man was nowhere in sight. A sudden crash shattered the quiet. A furry fist punched through the window, extended one long claw, and flipped him off before retreating. The house began to tremble. Roars shook the walls. Then the front door exploded inward as his own van came crashing through, slamming half the wall apart. The driver's door creaked open. Frank jolted awake, screaming. The old man, now fully dressed, shushed him calmly. You're awake. Laundry was in the machine when you showed up. Not exactly used to visitors out here. Well, friendly ones anyway. Frank blinked. So you're not planning to kill me? Not unless you earn it, the man drawled. What makes you think that, boy? Nothing's gone right for me lately. Felt like getting eaten was next. You clearly ended up here, by accident. Now what dragged you into my corner of nowhere? My van got attacked last night, Frank whispered, trying not to reveal he wasn't local. The man's face darkened. Sounds like you ran into GUMJAW. Who? Not who. What? He eased into a chair. Been haunting this stretch for a while. Smart as hell too. Took my dog years back. Nearly took me. Normally Frank would dismiss this as insanity. Tonight, he couldn't. What exactly is GUMJAW, and what does it want? No idea what it wants, but it's obsessed with teeth. Probably 'cause it's missing nearly all of its own. How do you know that? Because I watched it rip out my dog's teeth and try to stick him in its own mouth. Frank swallowed. You still haven't told me what it is, and I ain't going to not yet. The man stood. I'm going to town tomorrow. I'll take you. Best you forget what you saw tonight. Name's Elliot Tuber. Frank hated the answer. Tomorrow, after everything I've been through. Lower your voice, you fool, Elliot snapped. It's dark out, and I ain't risking getting peeled open because you're impatient. Raise your voice again, and I'll toss you outside with a damn bell around your neck. GUMJAW doesn't need help finding us. Silence returned, heavy, suffocating. After a while, Frank spoke. Do you at least have a working phone? No, Frank, I don't. Frank froze. I never told you my name. Elliot rolled his eyes. I went through your stuff, wallet and all. Needed to know who passed out on my porch. Frank exhaled in relief and sat back down. Why live out here? Frank asked. If that thing hunts you, GUMJAW's new. I didn't always have this problem. Elliot shrugged. Never got inside the house though. I'll give him that. Scratching began at the front door. Long, dragging, hungry. He heard us, Elliot murmured. Or maybe he just thinks we're kin. The clawing grew louder. Come with me, Elliot said, strangely calm. I don't want to die. Quit whining. Do as I say. You'll make it through. As they climbed the stairs, Frank glanced back and regretted it instantly. A monstrous head forced its way through a fresh hole in the door. Bright, unnatural green eyes glared at him. A mouth of nothing but gums and one lonely tooth snapped wildly. Its fur was a dull, deathly gray. That's a damn werewolf. Frank gasped. Elliot shoved him into a dark room, locked the door, and flipped on the light. Firearms lined the walls, but that wasn't what froze. Frank mounted head screechers he'd only heard of in legends. Werewolves, lizardmen, kappa, yeti. Elliot's voice lost its southern drawl. Frank, I haven't told you the truth. I used to hunt monsters. GUMJAW is my mistake. He opened a cabinet and loaded weapons as he spoke. I found him years back in Louisiana. Thought I'd killed him. Took his teeth as trophies, since I couldn't drag his head through a crowded town. When I was pulling the last one, he woke up and took a bite at me. Got away? Frank's stomach dropped. I thought silver bullet werewolves were fiction, Frank breathed. They are. Except for him, Elliot muttered. He heals from everything. Only thing he wants now is his teeth, and me. So you moved out here to avoid leading it into a crowd. Elliot hesitated. No, I'm hiding because I killed a man I thought was something else. Innocent man. My group smuggled me out here. What's a creorifeme that's not important? What matters? Have you ever fired a gun? Only a few times.